Well, welcome back to Your Spiritual Journey, the podcast that takes you wherever you want to go. And we're all headed to the same place. Today, as our guest, we have Laura Budde. She's an instructor of Qigong, Yoga, and Tai Chi over Zoom and in person in Forest Hills. She holds a degree in integrative health studies from Chatham University and is a level 2 Reiki practitioner. Laura enjoys nurturing her personal practice, connecting with others, gardening, cooking, and spending time in nature. In fact, in the spring of 2023, she and her husband Paul plan to through hike the 2,200-mile Appalachian Trail from Georgia to Maine, and I am so impressed. So I personally know Laura because I take one of her in-person classes in Qigong in Forest Hills, and I can tell you that I love that Qigong experience. I do it daily over YouTube, but once a week, I get to do it in person with Laura, and it's just an amazing energy push. So, Laura, as we do with all of our guests here on Your Personal Journey, let's start with your personal journey, your personal spiritual journey, as you've experienced it so far.
Thank you so much, Bob, for having me. It's just an honor to be here with you today. Well, I guess I could begin at the beginning. I was born in Illinois, in Chicago, Illinois, and when I was about 2.5, my family moved to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, so my father could attend the Pittsburgh Theological Seminary, and that's where I started to form my very first memories. And they were very positive. It was just beautiful. I feel very close to the city of Pittsburgh. My father was originally from Pittsburgh, from the Swissville area, and so he had some family around as well. And then I grew up. He took his first church in Mingo Junction, Ohio, and so we went there. And so I'm an only child, and I spent a lot of time in church. In the Presbyterian Church, which I think of more as a cultural experience than a religious experience or than a spiritual experience. But I do want to say that I feel like my spiritual journey encompasses my entire experience. And so even places, even times where you don't think, oh, that's not necessarily something you might categorize as a spiritual experience, it truly is when you even look back on it in retrospect. My family was very liberal Christian, I would call them. My experiences in the church were very positive for the most part. We moved to Hilliard, Ohio, and so we kind of had this thing where we moved every about 3 or 4 years, and so I got very good at making friends and at just adapting to new experiences. And that's why I think it's quite important for my own journey, was that ability to adapt and being comfortable with ambiguity from a young age, knowing that I would meet new friends and that it would always be okay. Everything was just always okay. When I was 13, so I was relatively young, we moved to Silver City, New Mexico, and that was quite a trek. It was around that time that I started to see my father struggle with the church. He really had a hard time with certain parishioners, and it was a very difficult time for him. And he took a church in Silver City, New Mexico, but I think he really wanted to leave the ministry, but he didn't really know what else he would do. And so in July of 1996, he committed suicide, and that was a very difficult time for my mother and I. And I would say that during that time, I felt, I never felt alone. I always felt supported. I felt supported on a level, no matter what choices I made. I was a teenager. I was going through a lot. I was 14 when he died, but I made a lot of poor choices, but I always felt safe. I always felt secure. I felt like I had something to offer, and I didn't know what that was. We moved again, my mother and I, and we moved, eventually landing back in Illinois, closer to her family in central Illinois. And we were not involved in the church after my father's death. We didn't really continue with the church. It just didn't seem like something either of us wanted to do. And then I graduated from high school, and right around the September 11th of 2001, I met the man that would become my husband for the next 8 years. We got married 3 weeks after we met, and and
Wow.
it was quite an experience. And he had several children, and so I kind of jumped into this mothering family role. It was a very difficult experience. He had, I would say, some issues with depression and such, and so it was a very difficult time that I recall as well. So these are kind of years of struggle, I would say. My childhood was quite happy, and I felt very nurtured by that cultural experience of a church. And then once my father died, I felt kind of like I was on my own, but I felt supported at the same time, and I was just making decisions that didn't always make sense to myself. But at the same time, I feel like I started meeting people that just in daily interactions, people that were very kind, and I was always very kind, and I tried to nurture that kindness within myself. And the more I did that, the more I realized how important that really is. And so that's where the importance of my life comes from, is to try to be as kind as possible to other people. Because you never know what another person's going through. You never know what their experience is. But I always did feel supported. I have a daughter. She's 19. And I left central Illinois and got a divorce. My husband and I divorced. And my daughter ended up staying in Illinois because she had a lot of family there. And so then that was another big struggle for me, was how to navigate that experience. And I moved out to Steubenville, Ohio, where my mother had relocated. And again, I just found myself in situations where I met really kind people who were always helpful, people who offered a kind word or something, and they didn't even realize how much it reverberated within me. And it fueled my own personal development. It fueled my feeling this sense of support that I could never really pinpoint. I felt like it was kind of all around me. And that in Steubenville, Ohio, I ended up meeting my husband, Paul and I have been together for 13 years. And I got a job that paid well at the time I needed that. And I eventually relocated to Pittsburgh. And here in Pittsburgh, I felt like I needed to do something different. I ended up going back to college to finish my bachelor's degree because I hadn't done that. And I had just been busy with other things. And that's why I went to Chatham University and got a degree in integrative health studies and learned about mind-body medicine and body-based therapies and traditional Chinese medicine as well. So I started to get this taste of some of these ways that, some of these modalities that can be extremely helpful for people. It was also when I moved here out where my mom lives that I got introduced to yoga. I had never experienced yoga before, and so I was 27, I guess, at the time. And at the mall in Steubenville, this little crumbling mall, there was one of the shops was open. It was a pay what you can yoga class. And there was a guy and it was me and one other person in his pay what you can yoga class. And I absolutely loved it. And so then I got a video from the library and I really liked it. And I started to change the way that I ate. I started to change the way that I cared for myself because I was going through this pretty big struggle at that point in time. And that was when I was getting a divorce from my first husband, and my daughter was living in Illinois with him. And it was just a tremulous time. I started wanting to take better care of myself. And as I started to take better care of myself, I could feel even more supported. So it was it's hard to explain, I guess. Moving to Pittsburgh, there were lots of opportunities to practice yoga. There were many different yoga studios. And so I started really going on a regular basis to different studios in the Pittsburgh area, and enjoying that. Went back to college and completed my bachelor's degree in the integrative health studies. And I just wanted to help people. And I felt like I had helped myself a lot, even though, we're always still kind of struggling with our experiences and what do they mean to us, and how do we continue to grow. And so I eventually started working at the Pittsburgh Center for Complementary Health and Healing in an administrative position there, and working with a lot of massage therapists and Reiki practitioners. And they do many different therapies there that I feel can be quite beneficial when we think about how we hold stress and tension in the body, and how our emotions are held in the physical body as well. Sometimes we might feel kind of dense and heavy and really, kind of, heavy is the best way to describe it. And maybe we go to a yoga class, or we practice Qigong, or we get a massage and we feel lighter. We feel like maybe we've processed some of these deeply held emotions that are in our tissues, and we've kind of released them. And so I started to really, really love what massage therapy had to offer. I knew that I wasn't going to be able to offer massage therapy. It just didn't feel right to me. What I wanted to do was help people find more of a self-efficacy. I'm really interested in, from my own experiences, kind of discovering things that helped me, that resonated with me, starting to read different books and be, just going along my path and finding things that resonated with my own experience and allowed me to feel better and process better. And so then I did go, and I went and did a 200-hour yoga teacher training, and that was in 2019, and that was at a place in the South Hills. And from there, I got introduced to Tai Chi at a different place, and they just kind of come out of the woodwork, right? All of these, and then there's Tai Chi, and so I started to practice Tai Chi, and it did something for me that yoga had never done, and Qigong came into that. Qigong was a part of our Tai Chi practice, and I loved that even more. Just this meditative practice where you're moving and you're breathing, and it has this nice, it's self-efficacy. It's something that you can do at any point in time in the day. You could make a few movements or just become aware of your own breath. If you know some postures, and this could be with yoga or with Qigong or Tai Chi, it doesn't matter what it is. Walking has become this wonderful experience for me. And I've recently learned, and I hope it's true, I've read about it, that it's true, that as we walk, when we're walking, our eyes are making lateral movements right and left, which is helpful at processing information. That's something that we do during REM sleep, processing information. Or if you've ever heard of, was it EMDR, eye movement desensitization, and I can't think of what it's called. I might have written it down, but I can't remember. But anyway, just these therapies where you use the movement of the eyes, how that can make a difference in how you process these things that we're working out constantly, right? So for myself, what happens is I'm always thinking and I'm remembering, and you might feel this way too. I'm thinking, I'm remembering, I'm coming into a new situation and applying all of the experiences that I've had so that I can try to avoid being hurt, right? That's how humanity got to this point, is to try to avoid the pain and all of these practices, this experience, it's just been cumulative. There's just been so many pieces of it that have come into play over the course of my experience thus far, and I'm 40 years old, so I've got maybe a lot more to go as well. It's really exciting. It's very exciting. But around this time, as I'm discovering all of these different kind of modalities, and I'm eating differently, some other things happen. We started to spend way more time in nature, doing a lot of hiking, my husband and I, and as we hiked, as we walked, I felt like I could process things a lot better, process some of these more deeply held experiences or pain that I might have within me. I felt like I could process it a little bit more, a little easier. And then I didn't feel as upset or as triggered by certain words or situations or circumstances or even the memories themselves. It became less triggered by them. And so I fell in love with being in nature, and we've progressed. We love to camp, we love to hike and backpack, and we both felt at the same time, well, a few different things. One of them was that we didn't want to eat meat anymore, and I'm not knocking anyone who eats meat. We eat plenty of meat, but I feel like that's made a real difference in how I feel energetically. That's just my experience, and then deciding to hike the Appalachian Trail. That's again what I consider is just the next step in this amazing process of my own spiritual journey. I didn't even mention Reiki. I came across Reiki alongside Qigong, and I have to tell you that something that was fascinating to me is when I went to meet. I looked online for a Reiki and Qigong teacher. I wanted them both together, and I found a person who did that, and she was located in Highland Park. And I went to meet with her in her office, and it was right across from the seminary, right across from Pittsburgh Theological Seminary, where I had formed my first memories. And I can't even express how supported I felt at that moment in time. It was like a whole circle, and it's like, now you're back for this whole new chapter. Wow. And that blew my mind. That really blew my mind. And I got what I needed out of that experience. But I think more than anything, it was to really feel that synchronicity that you get sometimes also. Yeah. And, so I mean, that's it pretty much in a nutshell, and there's a lot there. But I would love to, move from there and just see what kind of questions the audience might have.
Well, in this case, I represent the audience, and I've known you for a while now. I guess
About a year and a half, probably.
Yeah. And thoroughly enjoy your Qigong. One of the many questions I have is that you teach a particular form of Qigong, 5-element Qigong. Have you explored others and settled on 5-element for a particular reason? And maybe you could explore that for me and for our audience.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I had my first experiences with Qigong were as part of warm-ups for the Tai Chi practice that I was learning, the Tai Chi forms I was learning. And they didn't have any specific methodology alongside of them. It was more like, these are your warm-up exercises. And then the individual who I started studying Qigong and Reiki with, she taught Tao 5-element Qigong, Tao Yin 5-element Qigong. So it was more of this Taoist form of Qigong that was centered on 5-element theory, which is in traditional Chinese medicine, it's used quite a bit when it comes to health and well-being and the balance of different aspects of ourselves. I've experienced some other forms of Qigong, but that one, sometimes you just know that at that moment it's just perfect for you. And this idea of the organs of the body, and which is a big part of 5-element Qigong, is sort of balancing the organ systems of the body. I found that to be quite interesting just because I had taken a class on traditional Chinese medicine when I was at Chatham. But more than that was this idea of yin and yang, of this balance of kind of light and dark, or of quiet and resting phase, like where we're at right now with regards to wintertime. This idea of kind of rolling with the seasons, and then you have this yang, this warm, hot summer. So you have kind of this balance between the summer solstice and the winter solstice, and then the equinoxes. And you have this whole seasonal experience, this very nature-based. 5-element Qigong is very nature-based. It's about these identifying these cycles in nature and then also feeling them within yourself, not necessarily as something that happens like, oh, I only feel this way in the summer. I only feel this way. I'm only really planning in the spring when that's that growth phase, or I'm only really joyous in the summer and fire, or earth only happens in transition periods, and that's when I can feel solid and safe, or metal is the time of letting go. It's the autumn season, and it's characterized by the lungs and by releasing, processing grief and disappointment, or water is this time of quietude, of nourishing yourself. It's something that's more, it's not just a seasonal experience. It's something that we can experience within ourselves. In various times in a day, in the course of a day. And so it just, I feel like it expands into, it's just really resonated with my experience.
A lot of people experience sad seasonal affect disorder during the winter time. Would you say that this is able to counterbalance what sad does for people?
I think that it's a methodology that one could utilize to balance themselves. To say, well, for instance, as I continued to move along and learn more about 5-element theory, I came across this really more deep kind of inner work that one would utilize with it. And here's an example. If we feel safe, we have to feel safe to heal. We have to feel safe. That's the earth element. That's the sense of safety and nourishment and nurturing, right? So we feel that safety. And then that allows us to quiet our mind, which is wood, which is growth. It's this kind of rational thinking, right? Oftentimes we'll feel like we want to over-rationalize things, or we'll logic our way through a situation, or we'll try to suppress our feelings, our emotions with that sense of rational thought. We place a lot of emphasis on that in our country, in our culture. But if we can feel safe in earth, if we can feel safe, if we can kind of feel our feet rooting into the ground, then we can quiet the mind and say, it's okay, we don't have to think about that. Then we allow ourselves to feel. And that's metal. You just allow yourself to feel, to experience this sense of sensitivity to how you feel. You don't have to, it's not right or wrong. It's not right or wrong. And from there, I think that's where a lot of the seasonal affective disorder might come from, is we want to be more active. We want to feel like we can do things. We want to solve problems. And then sometimes you can't really solve a problem. You just have to allow it to take its course, to have its cycle in your life, whatever that is. And so 5-element theory gives you a methodology to say, okay, well, if I allow myself to feel safe, and I feel safe, I put myself in an environment where I can be quiet, and then just allow myself to feel however I do, and to know that those feelings are valid, and then to rest. I think that that's a big portion of it, is that people need to rest more. And 5-element theory encourages that, especially during this time of year, that this is a time where you're going to sleep more. I mean, I don't know about you, Bob, but I don't really want to get up until 7:30. And usually, and I know earlier today you said you got up at 4:40 and during our oneness group. But I need to rest. I need to sleep more. And at night I'm getting tired because that's the solstice. That's this time of year. It's a quietude. When we get enough rest, then we're not operating from this place of heightened physical stress and increased adrenaline and cortisol. When we get enough rest, we're able to then really come through that to the next phase with a renewed sense of vitality and ability. And so in that way, that's kind of the long answer, but in that way, that would be how you could address SAD with the 5-element kind of, with a methodology like that, like feeling safe, quieting the mind, allowing yourself to feel. And that's when you have to then incorporate fire, which is validating your feelings, like feeling purposeful. Fire is this sense of purpose within ourselves, even when we don't know what that is. The thing that, and I think we lose sight of our purpose when we start to feel really tired because we're run down, because too much is going on, and we're processing so much in our mind, and our mind, our body can't differentiate between what's a memory or what we're just thinking about and what's actually in front of us to deal with. And if we are able to relax the mind and just allow ourselves to feel, validate that, say, I'm allowed to feel how I do, and then just allow yourself to process and rest, you might feel a lot better, more strong, just more strength. And who's to say how long that's supposed to take? I don't know. Different times, different amounts of time.
Well, I'm kind of amazed as you described your formative years and your growing up experiences, that you always seem to feel safe.
Yeah.
That you were supported, that people were kind, and it makes me think of the law of attraction, that because you are kind and you show that kindness to others, it's reflected back to you, and you get that kindness. You draw it out of others, and you're able to create that experience for yourself just by being kind. So it's what you have to give, what you do give, is that sense of peace, that sense of kindness, and that self-efficacy that you talk about so well. I guess I don't want to come off so much as a fan, but I really am a fan of Laura Budde.
That. Thanks so much, Bob. But something I want to say about that kindness and what you just said, the law of attraction. I learned about a phrase, and it's called a non-anxious presence. And I can't remember who the author was, but the idea is, and this is something that you can find. It's also, you could call it entrainment. Entrainment. When we care for ourselves, when we express this sense of kindness, especially to ourselves, which is, for myself, has been one of the more difficult things to do so far over the course of my life. But when we can be kind to ourselves, it extends outwards, and it helps to encourage others. So like in my classes, for instance, something that I seek to accomplish is to meet everyone from a place of healing rather than a place of whatever their discomfort or disease is, right? Because something that I've really learned just in teaching, and I have not been teaching very long. I've only been teaching since 2019, but I feel very called to do it. I feel very called to interact with people and to share these modalities with people, just to introduce them, just to open them to something new. It doesn't even have to be come to my class. We have people that come to outdoor Qigong, which I like to do in the nicer weather, which is just free. And I want everybody to bring friends, whoever they want to bring. And it's not an advertisement. I'm not handing out pamphlets and saying, come sign up for my classes. What I really want to accomplish there is for people to be exposed to this and just say, this resonates, or this, this feels good to me. And then to allow that resonance to then move them forward into whatever's next for them, or whatever is helpful and beneficial to them. And so in my classes, that's something that I want to do also, because I've met a lot of people, and everybody has different ailments. Everybody has different injuries, old and new injuries, and emotional trauma, and experiences that weigh on them that maybe are heavy in their body, that they can kind of feel it as a heaviness, or as like seasonal affective disorder, or as an overstimulation of adrenaline and cortisol, and a constant kind of fight or flight response that people find themselves in. And I've found that oftentimes, and I'm not trying to knock talk therapy, because I think talk therapy can be quite helpful, especially if it's included with more somatic activities like walking or tapping or movement of some sort. I think it can be quite helpful in releasing some of that trauma. But I don't, not that I don't want to know what people are dealing with, because I do. People want to come to me in my yoga classes especially, and they'll say, I have this issue with my knee, or I have a problem with my shoulder. And my answer is always, you just do what you feel comfortable doing. And I've had people come to me and want me to tell them what they should do. And I don't have an answer, because I don't have your experience, and I'm not a doctor. And even if I was a doctor, I wouldn't know exactly what your experience is, right? Only you know. And I want to encourage people to listen to their bodies. And so that is something that is very important to me, is to come to my classes from a place of healing. I'm going to meet you at a place of healing, not at a place of, where you're struggling. I want to encourage that sense of entrainment. So if I'm kind to myself and I'm kind to others, and that's kind of what's being attracted to me, I want to cultivate that even deeper, so that in any time I'm having any interaction with another person, I'm meeting them from that place of healing. I'm extending my hand to them, and not from a place of feeling like I have to, or like I'm going to really do anything without any desired result, I guess. They have to let go of that, oh, well, then this will fix this person. No. I'm just doing what I can do, and that's all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, my experience with Qigong caused me to think about measuring my aura before and after. Just because the experience is, after a Qigong session, you typically feel energized.
Yeah.
And my wife, Amy, who also takes Qigong with you, says that that's one thing that she knows that she'll come away with is more energy after a Qigong session. So I actually took the time to have someone measure my aura before and after, and it doubled in size.
Wow.
And that was just after 15 minutes of Qigong. So I've been able to, I guess, not just feel the energy, but say, okay, here's concrete proof.
Yeah.
And it was based on my son's response with after me explaining Qigong to him. He said, well, how do you know that you're really having more energy? Maybe it's just in your mind. So so that's what caused me to measure it. But
well, and that's an interesting response. I mean, whatever works. Something that I really pulled away from my time at Chatham and in integrative health studies, which I had actually started going back to college. I took community classes when I was in my 20s. I started to take community college classes, but I wasn't ever able to come away with any type of a degree. So when I went back to Chatham, I was 30, and I was I was 31, and I was able to really learn about these different integrative methods, which it was all about evidence-based. It was all evidence-based. That was what it was all about. That was the only things that they could really talk too much about, is this is evidence-based, and it's hard to get evidence for a lot of these things. But the biggest takeaway was whatever works. So if it's, the least invasive, least expensive methods of increasing our vitality, right? And so does it matter if you measure? Sure, you can do that, because we live in this culture where we want to know, I want to have a chart. I want a graph.
Yeah.
I'm going to put it on a chart. It's going to look great. And you can keep measuring your aura and just put in your numbers. And you can totally do that. There's nothing wrong with that. But then that is that thinking part that for myself, because I tend to over-rationalize. So that's that thinking part where I have to let that go and just feel and say, I just feel this way.
Yeah, that's part of why when I get a new Reiki client, I like to measure the different chakras for them and show them physically uh, with the pendulum
Mm-hmm.
how much energy is coming from that chakra or not coming from that chakra.
Yeah.
And then after the Reiki, go ahead and show them again and the difference, because at least in their minds then they can say, oh, okay,
Yeah.
this is proof that what I'm feeling is real, that this is so beneficial. So, okay, here's a question that somebody in our audience is
Ooh.
wondering.
All right. Ready.
I know. Uh, when you say we decided, and that means you and Paul,
Yeah.
like you decided together to walk the Appalachian Trail from Georgia to Maine. My feet hurt already just thinking about it. People often wonder, in terms of codependency, what a we decision means.
Mm-hmm.
Because, did you both get the same thought at the same time and decided, boy, this would be great? Or did somebody say, I want to do this. Can I drag you along with me?
Right.
So just out of curiosity, could you describe that process of we decided?
Yeah, absolutely. The thought popped into both of our heads at the same time.
Oh.
That's how that works. When Paul and when I met Paul, I met Paul right after my relationship with my daughter's father, and I was in a really difficult place in my life. And Paul is a bit younger than me. He's 7 years younger than me. But he and I, our relationship has been built upon friendship and respect for each other. And I would say that what seems to happen, we're both very strong-willed individuals in our own right, but what seems to happen is that our wedding vows, I can't rehearse them completely, but it was to support our growth, like to support each other on our individual growth, our to encourage one another, and to support each other in enhancing our perspectives. I think was like one of our vows when we got married, and we've been married for 7 of the 13 years that we've been together, and we've really built that. That's been very intentional, this building of a relationship where there is quite a mutual, not one of us is in charge, I guess, if that makes any sense. It's not a traditional kind of marriage. I feel like our marriage is, it's not about having children. It's not about security. It's not about what the history of traditional marriage was. It's kind of changing. It's more of a spiritual partnership. And there have been several things that have happened in our lives where we both just felt it at the same time. One of them was when we both decided not to eat meat anymore. I was feeling it, and I didn't realize how much he was feeling it. But we were kind of just veering away from that. And then I'm like, I just don't want to eat meat anymore. He's like, I'm so glad you said that. I didn't really want to eat meat either. Or, just things like that have happened to us on numerous occasions. Just like when we moved in together, like I was thinking we should move in together, and, and then Paul's like, I've been thinking we should move in together. And I'm like, yeah, I think I've been feeling the same way, or I think it's time we get married. These things have just kind of popped into our heads simultaneously. And the same thing happened with camping and with hiking. And then with this decision to hike the Appalachian Trail, we'd been tinkering with it. I mean, we had both been introduced to it. Actually, I think I might have actually introduced, I don't know. I think we probably got introduced to it at the same time in different ways. I actually was reading a book, and the book mentioned Peace Pilgrim. And that was where I got introduced to Peace Pilgrim, who, if you don't know anything about her, I brought you this really great little pamphlet that you can have too.
Okay.
And she was the first woman to hike the Appalachian Trail. And she did it in 1952. And then she went on to become Peace Pilgrim. This was before she was, and she hiked for the next 30 years. She hiked across the United States walked across the United States, spreading her message of peace. And to me, when I heard that, I'm like, oh my gosh, I want to hike the Appalachian Trail. Was I ready for that? No, we weren't even backpacking at the time. And Paul learned about it somewhere else. And then we started to come together about it. And we're like, we should backpack. And then it's just one thing led to another. So, yeah, I have to say that one could call it codependency, but if it is, it's a really nice, positive form of codependency where we're both quite satisfied with our lives. It's nice to have someone to validate. We were talking about that earlier today. Do we need validation for our decisions? But it's fun to have a partner. It's really, I just think it's fun.
Well, I agree with that.
I know you do. Yes. Shout out to Amy.
Yeah, that's for sure. Okay, you mentioned, and this is maybe a good segue from what we were just discussing, this move to Pittsburgh from Youngstown, I guess.
Or from Steubenville?
Or Steubenville.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So how did that come about? I mean, did one of you decide I want to do that, or I'm going to do this, and the other came along, or how did that take place?
Well, actually, my dad's family was from Pittsburgh. And so my grandparents were living in their home in Swissville. They had a house on Westmoreland Avenue where my father and his siblings were raised. And they still lived in that house, but they had moved into a little condo because it was hard for them to take care of. They had a big, one of those big 3-story houses in Swissville, and so my aunt, my father's sister, moved them into a condo not far from where you live in that building there, and so. But both of them, shortly after I moved to Pittsburgh, certainly after I moved to Steubenville, they both passed away within like 6 months of each other, as happens. They were in their 80s, and that's just what happened. But that space was there, and my aunt asked me if I would like to live in that condo. And at the time I was living with my mother, Paul had actually gotten his own place in Burgettstown because he was working in South Point. He came out to Pittsburgh he moved here from Illinois, from the St. Louis area, to go to Pittsburgh Technical Institute. And he got a job at a company in South Point. So he was living in in Bridgeville for a while there. So he had his own place, and I was like, yeah, I'd take my own place, so I ended up living in that house. And the work that I was doing at the time was actually tied to the oil and gas industry, which is ironic to me because now I have many different feelings about it. But at the time, you'll love this story. I was working as a waitress at a restaurant in Steubenville, Ohio, because you have to understand, I hadn't completed my college degree. I was, I kind of did things, I was in sales for a while. I've been a receptionist. I've done things. I have plenty of experience. But I was working as a waitress, and this gentleman kept coming in, because he was working in the area, and he would come in for lunch and dinner. And anytime I waited on him, eventually he gave me his business card, and he's like, call me, I can give you a job. And so I was supposed to meet him about this job, and I was just dating Paul, and Paul and his roommate at the time were really worried about that. They're like, why are you going to go meet this guy? But he got me a job in the land service industry, and it ended up being very instrumental to my being able to maintain a positive relationship with my daughter and her siblings out in Illinois, and driving back and forth all the time. And the work itself was in Washington County, but then there was a job in Kittanning. So I was working in Armstrong County, and I was driving and then spending the week at a hotel in Kittanning, which is north of the city. And so my aunt was like, hey, why don't you rent this condo? And so I did. So I was living in the condo, and I was there for maybe about 6 months, and my aunt decided to sell her house in Forest Hills, but she didn't really want to sell it. She's like, why don't you live in this house? And I was like, I don't really want to live in that house because then I have to deal with house things. She wanted me to buy it from her, and I didn't really want to do that. I wasn't sure what life was going to bring. And but then, as happened, Paul and I both at the same time were like, well, let's just move in together, and we'll be responsible for it together. And so that's how we ended up in Forest Hills. Was then we did eventually purchase her house from her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it was just being supported. I just like always happens. Like, okay.
Just go with the flow.
Go with the flow. I've been given this message to trust the process. And I've been given it on multiple occasions throughout the course of my life without really understanding it. And I don't see auras. I don't perceive, I don't channel from that perspective. I don't hear voices. None of that. But I just feel this really deep inside of me, trust the process.
Yeah. Yeah, I was having a discussion with 2 Reiki masters last week, and they were talking about the fact, and this goes back to your discussion of EMDR and the eyes, and of being able to do Reiki just by looking in someone's eyes.
Absolutely.
And that just, I hadn't thought of it that way, that there's an energy there, and there's that transference of light, and that you can just sit and look in a person's eyes.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what it's all about. In fact, that's when I talk about coming from a place of healing, that's what it is in my mind. And that's what I really don't practice on individuals that often. I don't practice Reiki on individuals, but I feel like I channel that energy. Yeah. That's what the Qigong allows for, is that it encourages a grounding, right? It encourages, it's more of a yin, inward, grounding, earthy experience that allows you to become a conduit for that energy. And so I would say that that's something that happens, it's everywhere. And so the fact that we can just sit here and just give each other Reiki, Bob, just right now. That's what we're doing. We're just giving each other Reiki. Yeah. Isn't it nice?
It is. That's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Just beautiful. Gazing into your eyes. Yeah.
It's a beautiful thing. Beautiful thing.
Okay, I'm trying to get through all of my questions from the audience here.
Gotcha.
So this may be a touchy subject, but since you brought it up and you seem to feel comfortable talking about your father and the fact that he committed suicide.
Absolutely.
Did that have an effect because, and I guess I'm interrupting myself, did that have an effect on your spirituality, in that up to that point you were very connected to the church? And you said following that, you just got away from church, period. I guess inside that spirit, and we talk about being in spirit or having the spirit within us. Did that, it feels to me like that would have been a huge jolt to my own inner spirit at that point, and caused me to question a lot.
Yeah.
So could you talk about that experience?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, as I said before, to me, the church, the Presbyterian church specifically, was a big part of my culture. It was a cultural thing, more than what I would even consider a spiritual thing. My parents were very intentional parents. You'll get a kick out of this. They met at Moody Bible Institute in Chicago, Illinois. So very fundamentalist. They were very fundamentalist Christians when they met each other, and they got married, and they were married for about 8 years. And then they, after they had me, they were very intentional. So both of my parents shared in my upbringing quite a bit. And since my father was a pastor, I spent a lot of time with him, going to meetings or visiting people, I went to a lot of weddings. I went to a lot of funerals. I just happened to find myself in these situations. So I was involved in the church. I remember going to the church and riding my bicycle in the parking lot, or, walking through the church. I'd like to go to the playroom or wherever, the daycare area for the church, and just the way it smelled, or, I'd play office somewhere else in the church. I'm thinking of like summer times when my mom was working. She had a regular 9-to-5 kind of job. I was with my dad a lot. And my dad always was very respectful of me as a person. My parents spoke to me like an adult, not thinking that I had the mind of an adult, but they were very intentional, and they'd obviously evolved in their own kind of religious experience as well over the course of time. They were no longer fundamentalist Christians. They became very liberal in how they thought. And my dad and I would take walks together. He liked to take walks. So this may be that reason I like walking, right? So we'd take walks together, and he would, I could ask my parents anything, and they would do their best to respect me and to tell me the truth. One time when I was probably about 8 or 9, I was at school and someone said, he said the F word. I had no idea what the F word was. Right? What's the F word? And I went home and I asked my dad, what's the F word? And he told me. I said, what does it mean? And he told me, and I could tell that it was painful for him, but as a child, I didn't, and it's like, my parents were very thoughtful. They wanted to be as honest with me as possible. And the church itself, I had noticed when we lived in Hilliard, Ohio, that my dad was feeling he was starting to struggle, because I was getting to the age where I could see, my parents were no longer, deified in my mind. They were becoming regular people. I was getting to the age where they were just people, and I was a person, and I had my desires, and sometimes we butted heads, right? And I could see my father struggling a lot with the church. And so then when we moved to Silver City, everyone was very nice. Everyone was very nice, and they usually are. And no one he didn't seem to have any particular issues with specific people there, but he just kind of felt himself disappointed, I think, a lot. And he was starting to share some of that with me, which was probably, I don't know, when it's hard to be a parent, isn't it? To know how much you should share with your child and how much is really not their business.
Well, it would feel like maybe putting a weight on a child's shoulders that they're not ready to handle. And so when he died, I already had an understanding of or an idea of some of his struggle. He was very good at masking his, I'm sure he was depressed probably for quite some time, and he was very good at masking it, which isn't uncommon for a man born in the 50s, right? Like, you have to put on this strong face and to behave a certain way. So especially you're a pastor and people expect things of you. But I was already kind of over people expecting things of me as a pastor's child. I'd been raised in that. It was my culture. Yeah. Right. So for me, not coming to church anymore, not being part of that experience, was sort of a natural rebellion that a child would have against their culture. It didn't feel like I was losing anything spiritually. In fact, I probably gained a lot after that, because I started to feel, like I said, I had a really content childhood. It wasn't until my father started having issues in our church in Hilliard, Ohio, that I started to notice anything was off. And I was starting to become a teenager, and I was very rebellious in general. I just kind of wanted to do things my own way. But it felt very natural, like something that kids would go through, being rebellious towards their family. Right. So that's kind of how. So it didn't. I don't know. I don't know if that answered your question. Gave you a little background, I guess. Oh, it certainly did.
Okay, good.
Yeah. Well, I often, I guess, I'm an empath, so I try to put myself in another person's shoes and say, boy, how would I have reacted to that? Or, what would I have been feeling? How would I have responded in that situation? And it could have been really crushing, but it sounds like you've handled it pretty well.
I mean, I think I'm at a really great place in my life right now, and I feel I think it encouraged my becoming more compassionate in general. Just when you go through you go through anything, I mean, all things, you don't have to lose a parent to suicide to have had experiences that were very painful, right? I mean,
Right.
like, we all have painful experiences, regardless of if we have our parents with us, or if we have our children with us, or if, whatever's going on in our lives. And so just to be compassionate, to know that we are all perceiving those things however we do. And it's important to just be kind, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, one of the things that we have shared in our oneness group, and for those in the audience who don't know what that is, there's a book called Oneness. It was channeled through Rasha, and there will be information about that on our website. Anyway, we have weekly discussions around the topics brought up in Oneness. And one of them has to do with the ability of people to just decide it's time to move on, that this life isn't worth the hassle anymore, and I'm going to end this life and come back in another one where I'm more capable of handling what's going on around me. Do you have that sense about your father and his situation, or what is?
I remember that particular conversation, and something that blew my mind. I forget who said it, but then I wrote it down in my book, which I didn't bring with me. But it was that sometimes when those people leave, it's for the people that are left behind. It kind of encourages their growth. I feel like my father's death has really encouraged my own growth.
Yeah.
And there have been times in my life, especially in my early 20s, when I was kind of in an unhappy family situation that seemed like something I could never get out of. It seemed like, well, I signed this, this is mine now. I have to really be part of this. I really felt just a lot of despair during that time. And something that I knew I would never do is check out early.
Yeah.
Because I knew what it was for me and my experience. I truly believe that my father, when he killed himself, he really believed he was doing us all a favor. Like, he really truly believed that. I have no doubt in my mind. It was not an act of selfishness on his part. It was an act of selflessness, misinterpreted by him as selflessness, right? So, but it's, it's hard to know. It's hard to know really what's going through a person's mind, because it's so hard to articulate it also. And, but I do feel like his death has had a huge impact on my life, obviously.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, our time is about up. And as we often do, I'd like our audience to do some homework, which is just to think about the things we've discussed today and see what, if anything, applies to their lives. But I'd like to give you the opportunity to leave the audience with some thoughts that you might have that would be beneficial.
Yeah. I think the most important thing is to offer yourself kindness and compassion and peace and love. And so can we just kind of end with a meditation?
The mic is yours.
All right. And so allowing your feet to sink into the earth, and maybe rock from the ball of your foot to your heel. You can be seated or standing. If you're lying down, that's okay. Just feeling the earth supporting you. If you're in a chair, feeling your bum supported by the chair, feeling supported.
Let me just interject. if you're driving a car right now, do this meditation later.
Good call, Bob.
Okay.
Good call.
I'm sorry, but
that's perfect.
I just had that picture in my mind.
I like that. So when you're ready, you just feel supported and allow your spine to lengthen, and bring one hand to your belly and the other over your heart. And just feel your breath. Allow your eyes to soften. And there's nothing you need to do to change your breathing, just to be aware, to feel your heartbeat. And maybe your breath expands and maybe it lengthens. Whatever it does, just be with it. Feeling supported. Allow your eyes to soften or close. And then offer yourself a smile. And smile into the palms of your hands. Let that smile radiate into your body. Smile into the soles of your feet. Let it radiate into the earth. And offer yourself kindness and compassion, peace and love. And then take a deep inhale and sigh it out, releasing tension. And you can open your eyes. And I thank you so much for this time.
Thank you so much, Laura. So, everyone, I hope to see you next week, or at least you will see us and hear us, and have a wonderful time this coming week.